you have the opportunity in your life to meet someone who is really, really influencing the culture of the day and time, really helping for us to understand the teachings of the church, giving us the opportunity to enter ever more deeply into union with Christ via those teachings. And such a person is with us today. And I've interviewed Dr. Johnnette E. Smith in the past and have not had the opportunity in recent years. And what a great, great opportunity it is for us today. She's going to be with us, and we're going to be talking about a beautiful book that has recently been published commemorating the 50th anniversary of Humanae Vitae. It is called Why Humanae Vitae is Still Right. It is edited by Johnnette E. Smith. It is a compilation of essays by people who have been living the reality of striving to get Humanae Vitae and its teaching out there for numbers and numbers of years. It was basically a fun exercise for me to go through and to see who all of the contributors were. Some of them I have interviewed in the past, others I have not. But in all cases, they contribute something tremendous to the conversation about life, about the beginning stages of life, about why the church teaches what she does with regard to contraception, the way in which that decision of the church to share with us the great truth and reality of the way in which God desires for life to come to us has impacted all of the teaching of the church since Humanae Vitae, and it's really quite a compendium of essays. I want to highly recommend it to you. I really, really do. If you have questions about the church's teaching, if you don't quite understand how that fits into the theology of the body, if you are wondering, what has been the impact of the pill, culturally and societally, even anthropologically, then this is a book that you're going to want to get, and it's available for you out there at EWTN's Religious Catalog. That's EWTN. rc.com. And I certainly am inviting you to get out there at your earliest convenience and to get a copy of the book. As I say to you, we are not taking phone calls today, but we are out here for you on social media. And I am inviting you to share your questions, your comments, your insights, your inspirations, your words of encouragement with us here. Simply get out there to EWTN Radio's YouTube channel and Facebook page, and you can do that. I also want to recommend that you get out there to our website, womenofgrace.com. On this topic, we have an abundance of resources for you. I mean, just chock full of resources is that website on this topic. And I want to encourage you to become a subscriber to Women of Grace Exclusive. Through Women of Grace Exclusive, all of our archives open up to you. And you'll be able to go back and see the interviews that I've done with Johnnette E. Smith in the past, as well as with other thinkers and teachers on this particular issue. We've got a search feature there, and once you get out there as a member, you can search for all of the programs that we've done on a given topic, and they'll all come up for you. And I'm telling you, you've got hours and hours and hours of viewing time in the varieties of topics that we have covered in these past 30 years. That's right, 30 years with EWTN. What a long time. And the majority of those programs, I have to tell you, the majority of those programs are out there archived for you. So it's quite a treasure trove of information. There's also a lot of other great resources available for you through your subscribership program. We've got webinars that we've done on a variety of topics. They're available for you. We have retreat conferences. We've got talks that are available for you to listen to by great thinkers and by great spiritual directors. If there's a question that you've got, I'll bet you we've got a resource that can at least get you very close to the answer that you need to have. So we invite you to get out there and to do that and to join us. So without further ado, I'll tell you, we've got about a minute and a half here before we cut off for a break, but I'd like to introduce you to our guest today. Her name is Dr. Johnnette E. Smith. She is the author and editor of numerous books on ethics, including Why Humanae Vitae Was Right, Living the Truth in Love with Father Paul Chek. She wrote that, and The Right to Privacy. She holds the Father Michael McGivney Chair of Life Ethics at Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit. She has been on EWTN consistently through the course of the years. Marvelous teacher, marvelous woman of grace. Johnnette E. Smith, welcome to Women of Grace Live. It's great to have you.
Well, thank you very much. That's a very nice introduction.
Well, it's also very, very true. I have a memory of you, and I'm going to share this with our listeners today. We were at a conference. This is years and years and years ago, and apparently you had just landed, and conference was already moving, and it was time for your talk, and you had just enough time. I don't know if you remember this, and I certainly wish I could tell you the city we were in, but I can't. You must have just landed. They must have just rushed you to the conference hall, and you came in, and you had your handbag on one shoulder. You had a beautiful cape type coat on. You had the cape on. You had your handbag. You had your notes. You got up there, and you dove right into your talk. And you're about midway. You're about midway through, and you said, "Oh," like you just realized your handbag was on your shoulder, and you were still dressed in your cape, and you stopped and you took it off, your cape off, and set your handbag down, and the place roared. We just roared. And I thought, this is a woman who is single-minded in what God's called her to do. She's aware of nothing
on a mission from God.
Exactly.
That's hilarious. I don't at all remember that, but that's one of the regrets of my life is I haven't kept a sort of a journal of the crazy things that have gone on, in the course. And must be for you too. Just so many funny things happen, so many extraordinary conversations you have with people that it would just be great to have a little diary of that.
Yeah, it would. And you know what? I have to tell you, I've lamented the same thing because, we've led a very privileged life in that God has given us opportunity to meet so many wonderful people who have impacted my personal life and my life of faith very, very much. And you wish that, we had been forethinking in that way and would have done such a thing. But, I can still picture that moment. And, I always thought you were a marvelous woman, but that certainly endeared you to my heart. There she is, this eminent scholar, and she's just like every other woman. We get on a roll, and we're just rolling down the road there. So I'll tell you what, I'm delighted that you're with us. I'm delighted with this work that you've compiled here, and I'm delighted. I mean, what stellar people you've got giving us great essays in this book. It's tremendous. Let me just ask you a quick question before we go, because it's oh shoot, there's that music. I'm going to hold that question and come back and ask you that as soon as we come back from this break. We're visiting with Dr. Johnnette E. Smith today. She just has given us so much insight and wisdom on the teachings of the church, especially as they regard Humanae Vitae, that watershed encyclical of Pope Paul VI that was given to us all the way back in 1968. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of that. We're going to be right back. Stay tuned.
It'll sneak up on you, won't it?
It does, all too quickly.
Okay. I'm setting up the timer for the next segment.
Okay.
Of 18 minutes.
Right.
Anything quickly you guys want to hash out before we start the next segment?
Well, let me ask you, Jen, is there any particular area of the book or any particular essay that you'd like to spend a good portion of time on?
I'm going to get a copy of the book and put it in.
Okay.
My head moved on too much. I think that the first essay, the Krakow report, is important.
Okay.
I think, the essays they're all important, but Waldstein and Christopher West on theology of the body are both, all of them are noteworthy, but I'm going to get that book, and I will weave something in when we get there.
Okay, that sounds fine.
Okay. Starting up in about 5 seconds. Thank y'all.
Oh. Welcome back, friends. You're listening to Women of Grace Live. I am Johnnette Williams, very happy to be with you today to share this time with you, having holy conversation with you and holy conversation with our guest today. We've got a very special woman with us. She is truly a woman of grace. Her name is Dr. Johnnette E. Smith. That name should be familiar to you. If you have ever done any research on Humanae Vitae, you're going to run across her name and her marvelous writings and teachings that she's brought to us throughout the years. There was a cassette tape. Now, this is telling you and dating us a little bit and taking us back to a time. But there was a cassette tape that Dr. Smith produced on why Humana Vitae is right. And this cassette tape, I mean, millions and millions of copies of this cassette tape have been distributed through all of these many years. And we are blessed to have from her not only a book by that same title, but a new book called Why Humana Vitae is Still Right. And it's a compilation of a number of essays by eminent theologians as well as philosophers and individuals who have helped us to understand the theology of the body, to take us deeply into the heart of Holy Mother's Church teaching on this, given to us through Pope Paul VI 50 years ago in that watershed encyclical, Humanae Vitae. And I want to encourage you to get a copy of this book and all of Dr. Smith's books. They're available for you out there at EWTN's Religious Catalog. That's EWTNRC.com. You can order a copy of that. And also, too, I know that they've got programs that Dr. Smith has been on, EWTN Live most recently, I believe, with Father Mitch Pacwa. We've had her on in the past. And I encourage you to read up on this because I think, you know what I really think? I think that some of the issues that we're facing today, I think just by and large, a lot of the issues that we're facing today all stem from contraception. Really and truly do. And this book makes a good, strong case for that. So as we were going to the break there, Dr. Smith was with us, and I wanted to ask her a question. I was commenting on these marvelous people that she's assembled to give us this book. And I wanted to know, how did you, Johnnette, go about the selection of these individuals?
Well, really, which people more outmeters. I've talked to college to use it 5 years in the.
Hey guys.
Yeah, what's happening with the?
I don't know. Have you gotten far away from Dr. Smith? Are you far away from?
No, I'm.
It's the connection.
Your signal is really, really bad right now. Are you far from your receiving point from your headphones?
Let me see if maybe sometimes it strangely finds another
that's better now.
server, but
that is better wherever you moved or did.
Okay, I'm not going to move anymore. I'm in one spot. Is it better?
That's better.
Better.
Yeah, I would suggest if possible, if you can just kind of stay where you are, we'll be able to keep that signal. So, Johnnette, if you just want to start over that last question that you did,
Sure, I'll just
edit
I'm
that
sorry
out.
about that. Okay.
Not a problem. It happens.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. In 3, 2, 1. Well, Dr. Smith, so many wonderful voices have been assembled here in this book. I'm curious, what was your selection process? How did you select who you would ask to contribute essays for this new work of yours?
Yes, well, I have been following the issue, of course, over the years and trying to read virtually everything that's been written, and then meeting various people over the years at conferences. And just some people rise to the top as deep thinkers, or people who have a new angle on things, or people bringing a unique expertise to the question. And I'd written or edited a volume 25 years ago, to which this is really a companion volume. That volume was Why Humanae Vitae is Right, a Reader. And I've heard from college professors that they've been using it in their classes for the last 25 years. And it seemed upon the 50th year anniversary of Humanae Vitae, it was time to compile some of the best thinking and essays that have been done in the last 25 years. And in fact, most of these are in the last 10 years, and some of them are new essays put together for this book. So there really has been some marvelous thinking, some new angles on Humanae Vitae that have emerged in the last 25 years that fortify Pope Paul VI teaching on this issue. He a number of things would happen if contraception became widely available. More things have happened than he could possibly have predicted, and John Paul II's theology of the body has become part of the heritage of the Church in respect to Humanae Vitae. So all of these things I try to get people up to speed, if you will, on what is the state of thinking on Humanae Vitae today.
Right. It's an interesting thing because we tend to look at the situations that face us today, the cultural issues that we're dealing with, and we want to try to apply some kind of solution to them. We want to try to correct them. We want to try to resolve them. And yet the fact of the matter is, in order to be able to do that, you've got to go back to where the root of the problem is. And one, I think, really great contribution that this book makes is that it helps us to see that those prophetic words of Pope Paul VI that were given to us in Humanae Vitae, predicting, if you will, what was going to come if contraception was wholesalely adopted by the culture and became the standard for married life. They've all come true. And as you say, the tentacles have reached far and wide as a result of them. But people don't want to look at that. They don't want to go back to that because they have a misunderstanding of what conjugal love is. And one of the great contributions in your book, and again, I'm pumping this book hard, folks, because you need to have it. It's out there at EWTN for you, is St. John Paul II and the Krakow Report, Humanae Vitae, What If, given to us by a compilation, really, of a number of moral theologians from Krakow on this topic. Share with us a little bit about their whole concept of the principles of conjugal life, because it's here that we find the disorder beginning because it's misapplied, and then it branches out from there.
Is historical reasons. It was composed because Carol Wojtyla was a member of the special commission that was advising Pope Paul VI in his writing of Humanae Vitae. The story of that commission is becoming more and more well known, but he had put together a commission of individuals to advise him on how to teach the church's teaching in the modern world, which was increasingly being understood to be a terribly overpopulated world. And so he was trying to say, how can we present the church's teaching where the UN and others are being prepared to see the pill as the savior of mankind, because otherwise we were going to overpopulate ourselves to death and starve ourselves to death. So it was then, as it is now, it's hard to teach this teaching when people have this view that every child born is a threat to the well-being of everybody else who is already born. Unfortunately, that commission took a vote and decided that the church should change its teaching on contraception. Now, they were never given the mandate that they should ask whether the church should and could change its teaching, but they took that upon themselves. And as I said, Carol Wojtyla was a member of that commission, though he never was able to get to Rome to meet with the commission. They met over a period of about 2 years or so periodically. And when he got the reports from the commission, he put together his own commission in Krakow of 5 experts, theologians and a doctor, and he himself sort of his ideas dominated the commission. So he wrote this beautiful statement, which I'm quite certain was pretty darn close to the desk of Paul VI as he was writing Humanae Vitae, which explains both the natural law and the personalist reasons behind Humanae Vitae, a new way of thinking. A lot of John Paul II's thinking, even about natural law, are a refinement of the tradition. So it's an essay that greatly pushed things forward and helped, I think, Paul VI incorporate some of John Paul II's ideas into Humanae Vitae. But ultimately, John Paul II, well, it's hard to say whether his greatest contribution to Humanae Vitae was the book he wrote in 1959, Love and Responsibility, or whether his greatest contribution was the Theology of the Body, which he published some 10 years after Humanae Vitae was promulgated.
Yeah, well, when you think about that, you almost want to consider them together, because the genesis, I think, of Theology of the Body begins with love and responsibility.
Yes, it's true. I mean, some of the same ideas are certainly there, but Love and Responsibility is very much a philosophic text. It's attempting to explain justify the church's teaching on sexuality by referring simply to the nature of man, and really to he has a beautiful twist in one understanding that shows how significantly differently he considers natural law. Some people think natural law is based, or the natural law teaching, the natural basis of the church's teaching on contraception is based on the premise that the purpose of the sexual act is the reproduction of the species. And that couldn't be further from the truth, actually, because that's the purpose of sexual intercourse for animals, is to reproduce their species. But human beings aren't just any old species. Really, every dog and every cat, I hate to say it, is really just one more member of the species. But every human being is an absolutely unique creation, something that has never existed before and will exist forevermore. So the universe changes in a real way when every new human being comes into existence, because, as I said, they exist not only now, but they will exist for an eternity. So John Paul II says two things which are extraordinary, that the purpose of the sexual act is to bring into existence a new person, a new immortal soul, right? So it elevates the importance of this act, the sexual act, unbelievably, because the sexual act of again, animals is just that they bring forth another member of the species, whereas the purpose of the sexual act, which is meant to be a conjugal act, a spousal act, a marital act, is to make love. And through making love, they make new life, and that new life is eternal life. John Paul II takes us one step further, which I find fascinating. And at a certain point in his text, Love and Responsibility, he says that the purpose of the sexual act, the spousal act, is to make parents of people. Is to make parents of people. Yes, I know. It is sort of a breathtaking kind of statement. I like your reaction. And so it's not that you're bringing forth another member of the species, or really, in a certain sense, a new human person, but he says, you're saying with this sexual act to this other person is that I am willing to be a parent of you, and I am willing to have you be the parent of my children. And so you're really saying to this person, I want to be with you for the rest of my life. I affirm you in a way. You wouldn't want just any old person to be the parent of your children. You say, I want someone who has certain qualities to be the parent of my children. I want myself to be called to have certain qualities by you so that we can be good parents to our children. And he says human beings must always be conscious of this, not just that the sexual act brings forth another member of the species or another new human being or another person, but it makes parents of two people together. And when you're going to be parents together, you're going to have a lifetime responsibility. And so you want to make certain you have the love that can sustain that lifetime relationship. So that's a new twist to a natural law argument in behalf of the church's teaching on contraception. The thinking that he does in Theology of the Body is a response to a request in Vatican II that the church's teachings, all its moral teachings, which had largely been defended through natural law principles, that theologians seek the foundation for those teachings in Scripture. Right? He says that the church believes that, of course, reason and faith walk hand in hand. They're never contradictory. They always support each other. But it also believes that revelation goes way beyond reason for helping us understand the truth of matters. There are certain things we can understand on the basis of just our thinking about reality from reason. But there's much, much, much more that we can understand, and infinity more that we can understand through revelation. So theology goes back to Scripture, and eventually it goes back to Genesis, where we learn that we're made in the likeness of image of God. That's not something we can know through reason, right? Mm-hmm. That we're made in the likeness and image of God. And usually that has been understood, that we can reason and we have free will. But John Paul II does something, again, marvelous with that insight, which is God is a Trinity. You see, the philosophers thought that God was a single God. There's one God that rules the universe, and to some extent is quite uninterested in the universe because he's perfect and he doesn't have to pay attention to all these imperfect things. But our God is a Trinity, is a community of persons, a community of lovers, who created the whole universe out of love and cares about, every hair on our heads. And so we occupy an immensely different world from the philosopher. The philosopher lives in a world in which there's this perfect God that we're kind of straining to be like, but we'll never reach it. And he only thinks about himself because he thinks about perfect things, which is himself. And he didn't really make us. We just sort of emanated possibly from his being or exist at the same time. But our God is a creator God. And when I say our God, it's not a different God. The philosopher God never existed, but it's how philosophers could think about God. But Revelation allows us to understand God immensely more than reason did. So now we understand that God's a Trinity, that God made the world, that he made the whole world for our benefit. He made us in his image and likeness. Unbelievable. And then we fell, of course, but he sent his son to give us the graces to be able to become one with him, one with God. So it's an amazing thing. So in this picture, which John Paul II gets from meditating on Scripture, we're not just like God because we have reason and free will, but because we are lovers. God's a lover. God lives in a communion of persons, and we're meant to live in a communion of persons. And love is a matter of giving and receiving, affirming and being affirmed, if you will. When we see what's supposed to be our relationship to God, well, we glory in his glory, right? We rejoice in his glory. We praise the Lord because he's so beautiful and wonderful and good. And that's a certain sense what love is meant to be. I rejoice in your being. I rejoice that you're here for me to enjoy. And I hope that you're rejoicing in my being. So there's this incredible affirmation that comes in love, that two must become one. There must be more than one for there to be love. And so God made Adam and God made Eve. And what did he tell them? He said, become one flesh, and go forth and multiply and fill the earth. So now the sexual act becomes one that is participating in God's creative purpose. God created the whole universe for new human souls, new human beings. And he decided. Go ahead.
We're gonna hold it right there because we're going to go to a break, Dr.
Sure.
Smith, and we're going to be right back, friends, with our guest today, Dr. Johnnette E. Smith. If you're out there on social media, we can receive your questions today. That's EWTN Radio's YouTube channel and Facebook page. After the break, coming right back, more right here live on Women of Grace Live with our guest, inviting you to get out there to EWTN Religious Catalog. That's EWTNRC.com. Get a copy of our book, Why Humanae Vitae is Still Right. We're going to be right back. Stay with us.
Okay, we're doing pretty well with time. This next segment is 23 minutes, so if we get started the next minute or so, we'll still be in good shape. So anything you guys want to flesh out real quickly before we start the last segment?
Oh, I think we're doing really well. Are you pleased with the direction, Johnnette?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's good. Me too.
All right, then. No real questions as of yet. Just a lot of people saying hello and different kind of things. But as they come up, Johnnette,
You'll get them up here.
I'll send them across to you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I appreciate it.
All right,
people are enjoying the discussion from what I can see.
Absolutely. We'll start in about 5 seconds, okay?
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. Welcome back, friends. You're listening to Women of Grace Live. I am Johnnette Williams, very happy to be with you today as we continue to move forward in our special program. We've got a great guest with us today. Her name is Dr. Johnnette E. Smith. She has given us so much in terms of helping us to understand the church's teaching on the beginnings of life and why it is that contraception is opposed to church teaching and opposed to the will of God. She goes back many many, many years in standing firm for the teaching of Humanae Vitae, years ago giving us a cassette tape on why Humanae Vitae is right, and then giving us a book, Why Humanae Vitae is Right, a reader available for you out there at EWTN's religious catalog, EWTNRC.com. And she has come out with a new book celebrating the 50th anniversary of Humanae Vitae, given to us by Pope Paul VI back in 1968. Why Humanae Vitae is Still Right, a collection of essays by eminent thinkers on this topic. And even in saying that, I want to make the point that it's very accessible in terms of reading and understanding. Will certainly broaden, I think, your perspective. I know it has mine. And we want to invite you to get a copy of that as well at EWTN's religious catalog. Again, that's EWTNRC.com. As we went to the break there, Janet, you were talking with us and giving us the background so that we could understand this great gift that is ours in union with God in the bringing forth of another human life, and what this has to do for the individuals involved in that process, the man and the woman. And you left us in the garden, and God saying to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply. And I'm going to let you pick it up right from there.
Yes, I've been trying to put more emphasis in my talks recently on the first line of Humanae Vitae that I think in most translations doesn't really convey the thinking of the church on this. The document was first published in Italian and then quickly thereafter in Latin. And Latin really is the primary official language of the church. But those who translated it into English followed the Italian text. So the first line in those translations read the very serious duty of transmitting human life that God has entrusted to spouses. Now, most of us don't like duties. Duties are something that we feel are burdensome. It's something like paying our taxes and, making our beds and that sort of thing. It's a duty. It weighs a bit heavily on us. We want to perhaps fulfill those and then get on with more enjoyable things. Whereas the Latin used a word that's M-U-N-U-S, munus, which means in classical Latin means gift, and it always retains that meaning, gift. But it's also a much bigger meaning in a sense. Some people translate it as task, which I think also is it's too small of a word. When I list tasks I need to do for the day, they can be very small and unimportant and maybe even annoying things. With the idea, I translated it as munus, and that would translate the first as mission. So the first line of Humanae Vitae speaks of the very important mission that God has entrusted to spouses of transmitting human life, right? That God made the whole universe for human life, and he decided to bring new human life into existence through the lovemaking of two people who have made a lifetime commitment to each other, of spouses, right? Because he wants each child to have parents who are absolutely committed to each other and to them, and that they are meant to image to their children the love that God has for us, which is an unconditional lifetime love, self-giving love that is for the benefit. It's a love that you're giving to another. The spouses are giving to each other. They give life to a child. That child actually is a gift to God and to the whole world. The first line of Humanae Vitae goes on to say, it says the extremely important mission that God has entrusted to spouses of transmitting human life, whereby they perform a service for God the Creator, a service for God the Creator. So this is what God has asked spouses to do. When I was researching the meaning of the word munus, I went to the documents of Vatican II, and the subtitle of almost all the documents, it is something like on the munus of the laity, on the munus of the priesthood, on the munus of the church. All right. Familiaris consortio is usually given the title as the role of the family in the modern world, where the word role is really the word munus. It's what the group is meant to do. So Christ has the threefold munus of being priest, prophet, and king. All right, that's what he's meant to do in this world. He's meant to be priest, prophet, and king. Mary's munus is that she is the mother of God. The Pope has the munus of infallibility. The bishops have the munus of consecrating the sacraments. All right, and spouses have the munus of transmitting life. It puts our culture tends to think of that sex is what we could just say now is just sex. It has no grand meaning. It's just a physical act that any two people or any number of people can perform together and receive an immense pleasure from. But it has no more meaning than that. It's just like having a big meal or something that gives you an enormous amount of pleasure, but doesn't have any important place in the context of the universe. Whereas the sexual act has an importance in the context of the whole of the universe. It could bring forth a new human life. In fact, the act of sexual intercourse undertaken during the time of fertility is basically an invitation to God to create a new human soul, because only God can create a new human soul. So he has to be present in any spousal act, any sexual act that leads to a new human being. God has created a new human soul. It's not that he's not present in the other acts. He is. He's present wherever love is being performed, and a loving act of any kind is being formed. And this act of profound and complete self-giving that happens in the spousal act of sexual intercourse, God is certainly there. But he's there in a very special way when he creates a new human soul. And spouses actually are saying, the male is saying, I'm providing my sperm. The woman is saying, I'm giving my egg. And if they should meet, we will accept the new human soul that God will infuse in that new human being. So for those who understand God's intention for the sexual act, what his design and purpose is of sexuality, it's not just sex. It's a huge act whereby spouses enter into the very purpose of God in creating the universe.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk for a moment here then about the reality of the frustration of that act then, and the way in which that stands in opposition to the gift that's being given and the gift that's being offered. The gift that's being given in terms of God's gift to man to cooperate with him in this coming of an irrepeatable human person who will have immortality, and then the gift of the one spouse to the other, and the frustration of that with the contraceptive act.
Right. When using contraception, clearly the intent is to take out the life-making possibility from this act. That's the intent, and it's actually a failure of contraception if a new human soul comes into existence. That's a very sad thing, to treat the coming to existence of a new human being as a failure, as a mistake, as an accident, where the coming of a new human being should be precisely what spouses deeply desire. But they really want to, again, partake of this they want to perform and perform the great mission that's been given to them, and to receive the great gift that is meant to come to them through that. Now, it's clear that human beings can't have as many, very few of us can take on the task of having as many babies as our bodies will bear. Mm-hmm. All right. So God has done a very clever thing, which, we'll never understand all the brilliance of his design. But actually, women are infertile way more than they're fertile. A lot of people simply don't know how a woman's fertility cycle works. But a woman actually releases only one egg a month, and that egg lives in her body for only 24 hours, and it can be fertilized for only 12 hours. So there's only 12 hours a month where a woman can get pregnant. Now, of course, it's more complicated than that, because women actually secrete a mucus that helps keep sperm and semen, and keep sperm alive, and help carry the sperm to meet the egg. And that fertile mucus that she has in her system can keep a sperm alive for up to 5 days. So a woman can get pregnant from an act of sexual intercourse she had 5 days ago when she ovulates 5 days later, if the sperm is being kept alive in her body through the mucus. So we can't quite absolutely pinpoint when that act of ovulation is going to happen, but but we can read a woman's physical signs fairly well. So it usually means that the spouses need to abstain from 7, possibly 10 days a month. But the woman's cycle is 28 days. So that means she has 18 days of fertility, infertility during a month. And God has clearly made a woman's cycle infertile for various reasons. And one of the reasons, I think, is that spouses are able to have sex without the anticipation of a child. Now, it's not that they're rejecting a child in the way that contraception does. Contraception says we want to engage in this act and we want to shut the possibility of a child out of this act. So we want to engage in a fertile act but make it infertile. Whereas the couples who are using methods of natural family planning that allow them to identify the period of fertility are saying we're going to refrain from the act of sexual intercourse when a baby might be a possibility. And we've prayerfully discerned that this is what God believes with us, that it would not be a good idea for us to have a child right now. So we're not going to engage in an act and try to destroy the very ordination of that act to a new human being. We're not going to engage in that act. But God has given us 18 or more days a month where it's absolutely not possible to get pregnant. And God has said to spouses, basically, you can have sex all month long. Fine, that's great. I want you to be affirming each other in the way that the sexual act does. But if you're going to be having sexual intercourse during the fertile time, I want you to allow me, if I should so choose, to create a new human soul. So it's contracepting and not using NFP are radically different acts. One preserves the respect for God's baby-making power of the act, and the other decides to take complete control over it, to the point where it really does damage to a woman's body. The hormonal contraceptives have a whole series of bad effects on a woman's physiology. But even more so, in what the spouses are saying to God about their understanding about sexuality.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we've heard, I know, numbers of times from various individuals, people who have studied this deeply, as you have, as well as church prelates and priests in homilies, that this separation of the possibility of the coming of a new human person through the sexual act has culturally destroyed our understanding of this union between a husband and a wife, and also the ultimate goal of what sexual union is about. And you've clarified that very well for us here. But with this separation has also come a certain type of utilitarianism with regard to the sexual act. Additionally, it is brought, I think, about a type of narcissism, a type of a pleasure only for the sake of pleasure and for me alone. It's caused all kinds of difficulties and trials within married life. So I want to talk a little bit about some of these cultural issues that have developed as a result of the wholesale acceptance of contraception within our day and time.
Yes, there's an essay in the book by the now very famous Mary Eberstadt, who writes about the consequences of contraception, and it's a daunting story. It was, it was 25 years ago, and it is now. And as I said, we've had even more bad consequences than Pope Paul VI could possibly have imagined. I ask people just for a minute to just try to consider, if we lived in a culture in which no contraception was available, there was no contraception available, wouldn't that radically reduce the number of unwed pregnancies? I know people still have sex outside of marriage when there's no contraception, but there are many, many people who would say, I'm not going to have sex outside of marriage if I could get pregnant. I'll have to wait till marriage, all right, because I don't want to be a single pregnant woman. Or men might say, I don't want my children born outside of marriage. I want my children to be taken care of in a household of a man and a woman who are married to each other. We would do sex ed totally different. We'd be trying to teach young people the value of waiting to marriage. If we greatly reduce the amount of unwed pregnancy, we'd greatly reduce the number of abortions. We'd greatly reduce the number, obviously, of single mothers. We'd greatly reduce poverty. We would change the entertainment world. It couldn't be filled with so much just sex, so much sex that is just two people enjoying a physical pleasure with each other who have made absolutely no commitment to each other and have no idea of any preparation should any children arrive. So we'd have a totally different world because when we thought about sex, we'd think about sex means babies, all right? So what are we supposed to do in respect to sexuality is be prepared for babies if we're engaging in sex. Many, many people would realize that means you should be married, whereas our culture thinks about, sex means pleasure. Who can I have this pleasure with? No conversation about a baby, no expectation about a baby, no preparation for a baby. So things would change enormously. And right now we think that since sex with no consequences, that there doesn't have to be any respect for the baby-making power in the sexual act, that it means that sex is just for pleasure, not for lovemaking, not for baby-making, not for expressing commitment, but just for having pleasure. And that's where we get such things as homosexual acts. If non-fertile, acts of sexual intercourse that actually shut out procreation are moral, why aren't homosexual acts moral as well? If sex is just a physical pleasure meant for any two bodies or whatever number of bodies rubbing against each other, why not homosexual sex? Now, that's not something that Pope Paul VI spoke of in Humanae Vitae, though some theologians at the time said if contraception becomes widely available, there'll be really no objections against masturbation or fornication or homosexual acts. And no one projected transgenderism. But here we now have people saying, I don't think I belong in this body. And it's just a real rejection of the body, which contraception's a rejection of the body. It's basically saying to God, you made my body poorly. I want a body that I can decide when it's fertile or infertile. Why did you just give that to my body without giving me that permission? They're now trying to find a contraceptive you can basically turn on and turn off. And you can sort of decide, okay, today I want to be fertile and tomorrow I don't. That's an amazing amount of control. We don't do so well with that kind of liberty. Human beings don't do so well. So these are some of the shocking consequences. There's one that particularly breaks my heart, which again is the phenomenon of single motherhood. I teach in Detroit, and 80% of the babies born in Detroit are born to a single mother. 80%. And that does mean they are born into poverty. And that does mean that they are reliant upon the government for their well-being. And so far as I can tell, our government definitely does not give people enough money to live, not enough money for food and housing. And many of these women, when I'm helping, has no high school diploma, has never worked a day in her life. She's 24, and she has a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and is having one incredibly difficult time just even making ends meet. Though she gets food stamps, though she gets free medical care, it costs a lot of money to even to afford the money for. She doesn't have transportation, but even to afford bus tickets to get to the food banks to collect the food and bring it back on the bus. How do you do that with 4 little kids? You don't have money for a babysitter. Anyway, it just goes on. And you look at this and you say, this is profound misery that we have created in a culture that has made us think you don't need to be married to have sex.
Yeah, and when you think about that reality, Johnnette, on the economic scale, it boggles the mind, really. It boggles the mind for the way in which these women have got to conduct their lives in order to strive to make ends meet for themselves and their children. But it also boggles the mind in terms of the corporate weight of this upon the rest of the culture and the society. And so, when you look at just the economics, the pure economics of what we've created, it shows us the deleterious effect of this. But there's another aspect of this I just want to talk with you about a little bit, because when you're talking about the fact that, the transgenderism and the notion that sex is just for pleasure, in some way we can divorce the body from the reality and the totality of who we are. It gets back to this whole issue of the human person. And the human person is a composite of body and soul. The body and the soul is what makes a human person. So it sets up a type of dualism, doesn't it, within our own thinking of who we are, that somehow our bodies are just ancillary to the reality of who we are. And I think that has to lead to a profound sense of loss of identity and a profound sense of dissatisfaction, disillusionment, and a lack of fulfillment.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I think that's absolutely true. That again, we want so many things to be on our terms. Again, we want our fertility to be on our terms, which really is a terrible rejection of the body, especially the woman's body. It's saying as if there's something defective about the woman's body, that a woman's body can get pregnant through an act of sexual intercourse. And that clearly is a horrible thing. That's why we're willing to pump all these alien hormones, cancer-causing hormones, into a woman's body. Because we're saying that her fertility is some sort of defect in her being. So if we all look upon our bodies as kind of defects or defective, then we can start doing to them anything we want to bring them in accord with our view of what would be a good body. So girls aren't being, in a certain sense, loving their fertility from the start. I remember, the talks that we would get when we were, going through puberty, and basically, as you were starting your periods, mothers would say, this is a reminder that you could be a mother. Mm-hmm. And being a mother is a wonderful thing. Getting pregnant is a wonderful thing, and this is kind of a part of your being that needs to be protected, because someday you will want to use this power of your body to be a mother. But now I am me, and my body is something else. If I want to, exchange this body for another body, I'm perfectly free to do so.
Well, I want to thank you so very, very much for being our guest today, Dr. Johnnette E. Smith. I want to send you all out to EWTN's religious catalog, EWTNRC.com. The book, Humanae Vitae, Why Humanae Vitae is Still Right. Why Humanae Vitae is Still Right. Johnnette, thank you as always. Tremendous interview. God bless all of you. We'll be back with you again. Bye-bye now.